The power balance that governed who enters the United States and how was just shattered.
Completely.
Overnight, without warning, the President of the United States seized full, undisputed operational control of the entire American immigration system.
In a single stroke.
Yeah, in a single sweeping stroke of executive authority.
Yeah.
And this was not, a bill passed by Congress. It was a unilateral decree.
Right.
It instantly froze migration pipelines from nearly 24 nations, paused the entire asylum process, and revoked countless visas while people were sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And the central question that really defines this moment is one of violated trust. I mean, if the very system designed to protect the nation is the one that lets a lethal threat walk onto the streets of Washington, D.C., what faith is left in the rules?
What's left at all?
We promise to uncover the full story of this historic executive move, its structure, its legal basis, the shocking catalyst, and the stunning political and economic realignment that is already reshaping the country. Stay with us as we break this down in our in-depth discussion right here on News Focus Podcast. And if you find our reporting valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to support our channel. We truly appreciate it. So, when the sun rose this morning, you woke up in a profoundly different country.
That's not an exaggeration.
No, it isn't. We are talking about the largest, most comprehensive, and most sudden immigration freeze in modern American history. The scale of this is just. It's hard to overstate.
It really is.
A single presidential order issued in the middle of the night, it instantly dominated every major news cycle globally, from Washington to Brussels to Beijing.
And that context of how it happened is so critical because it defines the measure of power being used here.
Right.
This wasn't something that came out of a long legislative debate or, some campaign promise that was slowly fulfilled. This was, as sources close to the White House are describing it, the president exercising raw executive authority in real time. He was leveraging very specific powers granted under the Immigration and Nationality Act.
And the result was this total operational overhaul.
Exactly. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an immediate, irreversible command to federal agencies.
And that instantaneous impact, that's what makes this so different from, say, previous travel bans we've seen.
That's the key distinction.
They saw 19 nations targeted, asylum paused, whole categories of legal visas frozen, and entire federal systems just shut down.
We have reports of world leaders being, grabbed out of bed, grabbing their phones in the middle of the night.
Trying to figure out what just happened.
Yes, trying to figure out if their trade agreements or diplomatic statuses were even still intact.
Which is why the administration is stressing that this action was, and I'm quoting, not symbolic.
Absolutely not. It was entirely operational. It was designed to instantly dismantle the existing machinery of entry.
So let's talk about the logistics for a second. What does that actually mean, dismantle the machinery?
Well, think about it like this. The federal servers that process visa applications, that's the core backbone of our immigration system, right?
Sure.
They reportedly just went dark. Consulates abroad, which usually handle hundreds of applications a day, their systems were locked to any new submissions.
And we even heard those vivid, immediate stories about airlines.
That's right. I mean, this is where it gets real for people. Airlines around the world suddenly began receiving automatic denial codes for passengers mid-flight.
Mid-flight?
Yes, for individuals trying to travel from one of those 19 flagged nations. So you can imagine being a family in transit, maybe on a layover, and your phone buzzes with an automated denial because the country you left 2 hours ago is now on a list that didn't exist when you boarded the plane.
The chaos must have been immense.
Massive. And it proved the sheer speed and, frankly, the uncompromising nature of the order.
So let's clarify those 19 nations. What was the specific criteria? What got them flagged?
The administration laid out some pretty clear reasons, and they're focusing entirely on national security risk and the integrity of identity verification.
So it's about not knowing who people really are.
Precisely. These nations were flagged either because they're considered high-risk zones, highly unstable, or, and this is the crucial part, they are incapable of providing the reliable identity verification that modern security demands.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, in many cases, these are nations with failed or non-existent centralized civil registries. So the U.S. government literally could not confirm if the identity on a passport was genuine or if the person had a history of, say, violent radicalism.
And what about the scope of the freeze itself? Was this just about travel, or did it cut deeper into things like family applications?
Oh, it cut deep. The scope was comprehensive. It froze every single migration pipeline attached to these nations.
Every single one?
Everyone. Visa applications stopped, green card processing halted, Family-based petitions were suspended. Even the special immigrant visas, the SIVs, which are reserved for allies like interpreters,
Also paused
indefinitely. The speed was so intense that even cases that had been approved for a long time, people who might have literally had their green cards in the mail, were instantly flagged and pushed back into the system for review under these new, much stricter vetting standards.
So the message was pretty clear.
Unmistakable. For millions of applicants and for governments trying to manage this, the message was the old system, based on decades of procedure, was simply gone.
This wasn't just a policy change, it was a total structural reset. And it all traces back to one singular, horrifying event that happened in broad daylight, downtown Washington, D.C.
The brutal attack on 2 National Guardsmen.
An absolutely horrific scene.
It was an act of shocking violence right under the watchful eye of the federal government. But the immediate dramatic policy consequence, it wasn't just about the attack itself.
No.
It was about the revelation that followed, the who carried it out, and more importantly, how they got into the country.
And that is the crucial detail. The suspect was confirmed to be a migrant who, according to the details now emerging, entered the country through systematic loopholes.
Loopholes that were created or expanded under earlier administrations. That piece of information, linking a specific act of terrorism to a documented failure in the system, that changed the entire public calculus instantly.
It was a moment the public's patience just completely evaporated.
Exactly. All the political arguments, all the appeals to, global humanitarian norms, they just collapsed in seconds.
So the idea that America could continue absorbing what the administration called endless waves of poorly vetted migrants.
It shattered right there on that D.C. sidewalk. Sources confirm the president was briefed immediately after the incident, and his message to his advisors was reportedly blunt and direct. Shut it down.
And this action, while it felt sudden, it didn't come out of nowhere. We know the intelligence community had been raising red flags for months, maybe even years, about these kinds of vulnerabilities.
Oh, absolutely. IS wasn't happening in a vacuum. DHS, other intelligence arms, they'd issued warnings repeatedly. They cited systems that were fundamentally overstretched, underfunded, and just incapable of handling the sheer volume and complexity of the vetting required today.
In a post-9/11 world.
Right. The tragedy in D.C., in a terrible way, it served as the undeniable, violent proof for all those warnings. The public demanded protection, they demanded consequences, and crucially, they demanded a leader who wouldn't wait for another tragedy.
The era of hesitation, as you put it, it ended right there.
It did. The focus shifted immediately from political arguments about managing the flow to the absolute mandate of ensuring national security.
And what's really key here is the legal tool they used to do it.
Yes. The mechanism. The power the president leveraged is Section 212 of the Immigration and Nationality Act.
And for those of us who aren't legal scholars, what does that section do?
It's essentially an emergency brake. It grants the president the authority to suspend the entry of any class of non-citizens that are deemed detrimental to the interests of the United States. It's been used before, but rarely with this kind of breadth.
Breadth being the key word.
Yes. Freezing not just border crossings, but legal and discretionary categories across the board. Family reunification, for example.
So, using 29012 allowed the administration to just bypass Congress and act immediately.
Precisely. But the way they used it to halt nearly all forms of legal migration, that's what makes this so unprecedented. And frankly, it's what has legal activists gearing up for the biggest court fight in immigration history.
That's their main argument.
They argue that this use of 212 goes way beyond its intended scope, that it's essentially halting the legal functioning structure of the nation's immigration laws without congressional approval.
So let's move now to that actual structural reset.
Yeah.
If the 2017 travel bans were, limited actions.
This goes so much further.
So much deeper, so much wider. It's fundamentally targeting the foundation of the legal system itself.
Absolutely. We've moved beyond just restricting entry from a few specific countries. The administration is pausing entire migration categories. Categories that are fundamental to how the U.S. has operated its legal immigration system for generations.
This isn't just about illegal crossings anymore.
No, not at all. This is a full-on pause of the pathways most people associate with legal entry.
So detail some of those categories for us. We're talking about massive, long-standing programs just being stopped cold.
That's correct. We're seeing family reunification pathways suspended, humanitarian parole programs, which allow temporary entry for urgent reasons, paused.
What about work visas?
Low-skill work visas like the H-2A and H-2B, and for those flag nations, even student visas are all now frozen or under intense immediate review. The administration's term for it, structural reset, is actually pretty accurate. They're trying to rebuild the U.S. immigration system from the foundation up.
And their stated goal is what?
To prevent anyone from entering under outdated rules that they claim compromise national security.
And nothing has caused more immediate fallout, legally and politically, than the asylum shutdown.
Yeah.
Can you take us through the specifics of that? Because this isn't a slowdown or just a backlog adjustment, right?
Not even close. This is a full national operational halt on asylum adjudications.
Explain what adjudication means here.
It's the formal legal decision on a case. So if you had an interview scheduled, it's frozen. If you were trying to file a new application, whether at the border or internally, it's shelved. Work permit requests that are tied to pending asylum cases are instantly halted.
The implications for people already in the system must be profound.
Hundreds of thousands of people are in that queue. And what happens to their cases now?
That's the question.
Every single pending case is now being pushed back for revetting under a new, much stricter national security standard. So they aren't just waiting for a hearing anymore. They're waiting for a whole new security clearance process to be built and implemented.
Which could take months.
Or years.
Or years. So why such a drastic, immediate shutdown of a system that's supposed to be for humanitarian protection?
The administration's justification is uncompromising. It centers on one word: abuse.
They claimed the asylum system had been abused beyond recognition.
Yes, and they specifically pointed to what they called Biden-era loopholes. They alleged that under those rules, millions of people were able to claim asylum, even with weak or frivolous cases, which allowed them to get years of work authorization while they waited for a court date.
And then?
And then, in many instances, they would disappear into the country before ever having to show up for their final hearing.
They didn't pull any punches, though. They characterized that.
No, they did not. They called it, and this is a direct quote from administration sources, the largest exploitation of humanitarian policy in U.S. history.
That's incredibly strong language.
It is, and it signals their non-negotiable approach. Until new, extremely rigid rules are written and new security tech is deployed, the administration says asylum is no longer a system where entry is a given. It is, in their words, a locked vault.
So the focus has shifted entirely.
Completely. From maximizing compassion to prioritizing national security and documented order.
And beyond just pausing new entries, the reset immediately began revoking visas for people who were already in the process. This must be hitting some very sensitive programs.
It is. Immediate action was taken to revoke visas for people who, under this new review, were suddenly deemed security risks. And we also saw that immediate pause on the special immigrant visas, the SIVs.
Particularly for those who help U.S. forces in places like Afghanistan.
Correct.
So why pause a program that's designed to help our allies?
Because the administration claims those programs, while ethically necessary, had been running on autopilot for years. They were relying heavily on foreign government reports or local accounts without the deep forensic identity verification that security experts now demand.
So there's a new mandate.
An explicit one. Every single applicant, regardless of their past service, must pass a security-first review. They are ending the era of automatic approvals and what they call blind trust, even within these critical programs.
What does that mean in practical terms? Deeper background checks.
Much deeper. It means background checks now require biometric data, deep social media analysis, and mandated data sharing protocols with foreign allies protocols that often didn't even exist before.
This shift is happening across the board, but what about the legal counterattack? Surely an executive action of this magnitude is already facing major court challenges.
Oh, absolutely. The ink was barely dry on the order before the ACLU and several other major immigrant rights organizations filed for emergency injunctions.
What's their argument?
It's multi-pronged, but it really focuses on two main areas. First, they argue that using 212F to stop legal migration categories like family reunification exceeds the power that Congress granted.
Yeah, and the second point.
Second, and maybe more fundamentally, they argue that the complete halt of asylum adjudications violates the principle of non-refoulement. It's a cornerstone of international law that says you can't send people back to a place where they face persecution. They're saying this action effectively shreds the domestic legal right to even seek asylum.
So we have a massive legal showdown brewing.
We do. It's the president asserting emergency security powers versus activists arguing for the preservation of international humanitarian law.
And this legal battle is critical.
It will determine whether this is a temporary pause or a permanent structural shift. If the courts uphold this expansive use of 212, it sets a historic precedent. It would give future presidents near unlimited power to reshape immigration policy on their own, based on perceived security threats.
Which brings us to the political and public response, which a lot of analysts did not see this coming.
No, they didn't.
While we see the expected legal outrage, the American people seem to be sending a very different and much louder message.
The polling data is genuinely shocking. It represents a massive political shift. New national polling shows that a stunning 57% of likely voters support the temporary immigration freeze.
57%. That's not a simple majority. That is a significant portion of the electorate endorsing what is, arguably the most radical executive action on immigration in decades.
It is a political earthquake. But the most revealing part is when you look at the tremor lines.
What do you mean?
This support isn't just monolithic Republican backing. The data shows this huge block of support includes a significant and very surprising chunk of registered Democrats and the overwhelming majority of independent voters.
So the president is acting with a broad cross-partisan consensus here.
That's what the numbers suggest. He's not just acting with the backing of his base.
Why? Why this level of consensus? What's driving this sudden, decisive shift in what the public sees as a priority?
I think analysts are pointing to just widespread fatigue. There's a sense that the country had lost control. People are tired of the constant stream of crime stories linked to poorly vetted entrants.
They're tired of seeing their public resources strained.
Exactly. Overloaded city infrastructure, rising taxes to manage the social services burden, and maybe most critically, they're tired of what they see as being guilt-tripped. The feeling of being told that compassion requires them to sacrifice their own community's safety and economic stability.
And the D.C. attack was the trigger.
It was the trigger, but the sentiment underneath was already highly combustible.
We saw that reflected immediately in voter enthusiasm numbers.
Absolutely. Sources analyzing the polling showed an immediate 8-point spike in GOP enthusiasm overnight. It confirms this issue has immense political power. Regardless of their traditional leanings, Americans prioritized order and control, and they responded to a president who took immediate, bold, decisive action.
Even if it meant violating some established political norms.
Even then.
But the most unexpected part of this, the data point that kind of throws all the old political models out the window, is the generational twist.
Yes.
We are seeing young Americans, Gen Z, and younger millennials emerging as some of the strongest voices against mass migration.
This completely flips the long-held script. Political observers just assumed young voters would always favor open border policies, rooted in a progressive ideology.
But their motivation isn't ideological.
It's brutally economic. They are the generation that is paying the heaviest price for decades of what the administration calls unmanaged inflow.
Explain that connection for us. How's the economic pain hitting them harder?
Well, just look at their core economic realities. They are locked out of the housing market. They're drowning in unprecedented rent spikes. They watch the idea of a starter home leak completely out of reach while their own entry-level wages stagnate.
And the numbers back that up.
They do. The median rent increase in some cities has skyrocketed 30% or more in just the last few years, while entry-level wages have barely kept up with standard inflation, let alone that kind of rental inflation.
So the housing crisis and wage stagnation aren't abstract concepts for them.
They're existential threats.
And the connection to immigration policy is?
Direct competition. They are competing with massive ongoing inflows of low-skilled labor for entry-level jobs, contractor gigs, service positions. These are the jobs that historically were the stepping stones into adulthood.
They allowed previous generations to save money, to get a foothold.
Exactly. And when the pool of available labor increases exponentially, wages for those jobs are suppressed. The ability of young people to climb into the middle class is severely curtailed.
So when the president froze the migration pipelines, many younger Americans didn't rush to the streets to protest, which is what the political establishment expected.
No, they saw it as a temporary solution to their own economic squeeze.
An economic defense mechanism.
Precisely. And this generational alignment gives crucial political backing. It makes it much harder to dismiss the freeze as just a partisan measure or an attack on humanitarian principles. For them, it's a desperate attempt to stabilize their financial future.
This generational twist is the front line of what some sources are calling one of the biggest underreported angles of this entire crackdown.
Which is the economic rebellion now unfolding.
What do you mean by that?
For the last 30 years, huge American corporations in construction, agriculture, service industries, they've thrived on what was effectively an endless, elastic supply of cheap, low-skilled labor.
And this inflow was rationalized with humanitarian language.
And protected by political elites who, quite frankly, were insulated from the economic consequences in their own communities.
And the administration's immediate freeze is essentially slamming that corporate labor door shut.
It's a massive disruption. By pausing the inflow of millions of low-wage workers, the administration is forcing American companies to confront economic realities they have successfully avoided for years.
Realities like higher operating costs.
Higher operating costs from rising wages, the need to invest seriously in automation, and, crucially, the obligation to invest in training and retaining American workers.
So is the administration intentionally using immigration policy as a form of economic correction?
That is the core analysis. They are trying to force corporations to rebuild the middle class that, according to the administration's narrative, corporate interests themselves help destroy by prioritizing cheap labor over wage growth.
So they see this as more than just immigration reform.
It's an economic reset. They accuse the old system of using immigration as a pressure valve to systematically suppress wages and artificially inflate corporate profits across entire industries.
But there's a risk here, isn't there? If you instantly remove that labor supply for sectors like agriculture or construction, could that trigger shortages?
That's the crucial counterargument.
I'm thinking of crop spoilage, delayed infrastructure projects. Could it risk tipping the economy into recession?
The risk is immense, and that's exactly what economists in those affected sectors are raising. Industries dependent on seasonal or low-wage, high-turnover labor, like meatpacking or specialized agriculture, they're already saying they can't adjust immediately.
They're warning about rising food costs.
Rising food costs, massive losses, project delays. But the administration's response to that is equally blunt.
What are they saying?
They argue that if American workers aren't available at current wages, then wages must increase, or companies must innovate, or they simply haven't been paying the true cost of their production all along.
The signal, then, is crystal clear.
Workers first, corporate interests second.
It's the realignment that powerful establishment interests most feared.
Because it changes the fundamental calculation of labor supply in America, the administration is signaling that the era of unlimited cheap labor is over, and that will force structural changes in corporate investment and wage policy that could define the next decade of American economic history.
The sheer scope of this change, covering security, economics, and culture, it suggests this is not just a reaction. This is a planned strategy.
Yes, the administration is emphasizing that none of this is chaos. They are calling it deliberate choreography.
They want to assure the public and international markets that these actions are not random.
Right. They're presenting it as a layered, methodical strategy designed to take the entire existing system offline, rewire it completely, and then rebuild it with national interest, not globalist or corporate interest, as the absolute foundation.
And this strategy is defined by their 5-step plan. Let's detail those crucial steps now so we can understand the administration's long game.
The overarching mantra is freeze, review, revet, rebuild, replace. It's a sequence of operational tasks.
Okay, step 1, freeze.
This is the emergency measure we've been discussing. Everything is halted. They shut down the pipelines immediately so that no new security vulnerabilities can enter the system while they assess the damage and audit what's already here. It buys them crucial operational time. It stops the bleeding.
Step 2, review.
This is the deep audit phase. All existing pathways, every legal category, every mechanism from SIVs to H-1Bs is being rigorously examined. The goal here is to expose the exact loopholes and procedural failures that the administration claims were exploited, leading directly to that DC attack.
So it's an institutional self-assessment of vulnerability.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, step 3, revet. This is the operational core, but it often gets confused with the review step. What's the fundamental difference?
Review looks at the rules. Revet looks at the people. This is the security mandate. Every pending case, every application, even those that were previously approved, is subjected to the new security-first criteria.
Give me an example of what that means.
It could mean that an applicant who was 99% done might now need a DNA test. Or they might face a mandatory third layer of biometric background checks that simply didn't exist before the freeze. The key is elevated risk metrics and universal, verifiable identity security. The era of blind trust is over. They're going back to square one.
Then we have step 4, rebuild.
This is the long-term regulatory phase. The legal and regulatory framework itself, the rules that govern the Immigration and Nationality Act, is being completely rewritten.
And the stated goal of that rewrite?
To ensure that the system primarily serves American citizens and demonstrably upholds national interests, rather than serving what they call foreign expectations or globalist ideals. This means creating regulations that explicitly prioritize U.S. labor protection and verifiable assimilation metrics.
And finally, step 5, replace.
Failed, outdated policies and visa categories that are deemed unnecessary or too vulnerable are being replaced with new, targeted pathways.
And these new pathways will focus on what?
Heavily on high-skill contributions, proven compatibility, language proficiency, and mandatory assimilation criteria. This entire 5-step sequence, freeze, review, revet, rebuild, replace, is the administration's definition of restoration. It's systematic choreography designed to regain order after decades of what they view as open border drift.
And beyond the policy specifics, beyond the economics, we're seeing a profound cultural shift here.
We are. The administration's actions are built on and are also reinforcing a belief that is now openly shared by a majority of Americans, that the United States does not owe the world unlimited, unconditional entry.
For decades, the narrative was that America must absorb anyone from anywhere at any scale, regardless of the consequences to its own social cohesion or its own infrastructure. You're saying that narrative is collapsing.
It's collapsing because Americans have witnessed the very real-world consequences in their daily lives. Drastically changed neighborhoods, overcrowded schools, strained city services, and what they perceive as a weakening of cultural cohesion.
And the administration is responding directly to that sentiment.
By calling for immigration based on objective, clear criteria: compatibility, assimilation, and demonstrable economic contribution. It's not based on historical guilt or global expectation, as critics often charged.
Critics for decades labeled any push for criteria like assimilation as being exclusionary or even racist. But it seems that label has lost its power with the average American.
It has. The public is now drawing a critical distinction between outright hatred or xenophobia and what they consider to be legitimate national self-preservation. This freeze is effectively a cultural line in the sand.
How so?
It asserts that America has the right to protect its core values, that it protects its citizens first, and fundamentally it reserves the right to decide who joins the American family, not the global community, not international bodies. And that is a massive cultural reset that many feel has been decades in the making.
And when future historians look back on this moment, they'll likely trace the beginning of a major political and cultural swing right back to this week.
This action isn't just a policy shift. It's already being described as a historical realignment. For the last 30 years, America had gradually drifted deeper into what many observers called a globalist ideology.
Characterized by open borders, corporate labor pipelines,
and the belief that the U.S. must prioritize global interests over its own stability. That era is collapsing under the weight of the D.C. attack and the public polling that followed.
The immigration freeze, then, is the first unmistakable physical sign that America is entering a new political epoch.
An epoch defined by national interest, cultural protection, economic sovereignty, and unapologetic borders. The administration is banking on the idea that this shift is not just a temporary reaction, but a fundamental change in American priorities that will reshape an entire generation. They believe the American people have decided to decisively reclaim their home and redefine the terms of entry, and the political establishment is now just struggling to catch up with that new reality. This is truly the rebirth of American priority and policy. Thank you, Alex. And thank you to our listeners.
That's all for this deep dive. But it leaves us with one haunting question. Given the overwhelming public support for this sudden and decisive action, did the American people decide that reclaiming their home required violating political norms?